Hello, and welcome to the Future Unemployed podcast, where three pretentious teenage literature nerds discuss the deeper meaning behind quintessential pieces of work. This is episode 1. My name is Paula, and I'm joined with Ryan. Today, we'll be reviewing the book American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. It was published in 1991, set in New York during a market boom in the USA.
It follows the main protagonist, Patrick Bateman. He's an awfully rich investment banker that's up to date on all the fashion trends and always wears high-end products. You often see him monologuing about how he's wearing the whatever the latest Prada or Versace clothing brands, and he's often comparing
Valentine
himself,
suits.
of course, and he's often comparing himself to everyone around him, and he's overtly critical about the world around him, and it really reflects the time that it was written. It shows a lot of themes of racism and rampant homophobia. And it also talks a lot about vanity and gluttony that comes with excess. And it also touches on a plethora of other themes like homelessness, consumerism, and this idea of like a rat race where you're kind of just climbing your career at a dead end job just to make money and you're not really producing anything. Um, so let's first discuss exactly like what we thought about the book. What did you think about it?
I thought it was in a way brilliant. The narration, let's just start there. It's very, very characteristic. I think the only time I've read a narration that was similar to that was in No Longer Human by Dazai Osamu. That one was also really painful to read. But at the same time, I couldn't stop reading it because I knew that the author was using the narration to show a point. And so in American Psycho, I feel that Ellis really showed the vanity and also how lacking, how devoid Patrick Bateman's life was of any feelings, any emotion, truly, other than rage. It just feels empty, and it's so detailed. It feels like it's unnecessary because it always goes into detail about yeah, again, what was he wearing, even like perfume, what he was eating, all of those little things that I don't think we really pay attention to so much in real life. Instead of focusing on um so I feel like the way he puts almost juxtaposes the very serious gore, the violence that he performs on homeless people and prostitutes especially, and contrasts that, and not contrasts it, that's the thing. He writes exactly the same about all of those events as he would describing his Valentino suit. Actually, in my opinion, he goes more into detail about his Prada, his Versace, more than he does about these real people that he's harming. Patrick Bateman is harming.
And I was gonna actually build off like the whole thing about the narration, and I thought like how he written again, it was very painful to read, but it also I think showed another aspect is that a lot of this is built off of insecurity and anxiety, as he's so overly analytical about everything that he's wearing and what other people are wearing and making sure he's always on top. It doesn't His thoughts don't portray him as someone who's like very confident, even though his actions do. I think these like overthinking of everything into every little minute detail that's almost like on an OCD level. It actually I thought was really interesting in how it showed how a lot of this consumerism and a lot of this just blatant vanity stems from an effect of insecurity and anxiety. And I think it can show us that consumerism actually feeds into people's fear and is using that for them to consume more and more and more.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually. Do
And
you?
then, oh yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Do you think it's like a cycle where consumerism, where people like fall into mm, what's the word for it? Uh, Concede. Okay, they concede to consumerism because of their insecurity, and then their insecurity is furthered by consumerism. Like, do you think this is a cycle?
I do think it's a cycle. I think it it tries playing into people's fears of not being enough. Humans are, usually characterized as social animals, and then I think it plays, especially the fashion industry, or any beauty industry, perfume, makeup, or hair products. They all play into this social aspect of human lives, and it comes with a promise of people will like you more, people are going to think you're cool, people are going to respect you because you consume this, because you did this, and then people freak out over that, and not in what really matters, about literally everything else about you as a person or individual. Um, I think it can like really tell us a lot about deterioration of society because of late stage capitalism. Um,
Absolutely. And I think a huge part of it is also the boom in the marketing industry. I mean,
of
of course,
course.
it comes with late stage capitalism, but I think like the idea of, oh, if you get this product, your life will suddenly make sense, or you're better than other people, which is very evident in the book. I don't remember any direct references to commercials. Do you, by any chance?
I remember that like a lot of the times, like I don't remember specific commercials, but a lot of times he was walking around, he'd see posters, or specifically on buses, they're very iconic in New York. That
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So I
Uh,
guess that's also another thing that this book shows the mechanism behind how capitalism fuels insecurity and vice versa.
I would definitely agree. Um, and then we've both seen the movie. What do you think about I guess first let's talk about like how true to faith is the movie to the book? Like how accurate would you say it is?
I think the movie was a little more funny than the book. I mean, it
Funny.
is labeled a comedy. Well, yes, it is actually labeled as a comedy on
Oh
most.
wow.
Yes. And to be fair, I did laugh during the movie at points. Of course, at points it was gruesome and horrifying, but in other words, I feel like Ellis tried to kind of mock, like it was very sarcastic, it was very jaded, like he was clearly trying to mock as a way of criticizing the whole culture surrounding like Wall Street, surrounding um consumerism and all of that. But I think the movie went one step further and fully satirized it, just made it into something that you laugh at without thinking. But I also think in general movies make books more digestible, so I guess that's why
I,
this
I
also happens in American Psycho.
I would actually totally agree. I didn't really think about that. Would you say like because it's also a movie, like it adds another dimension that they can use to show their points about capitalism?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if we break the fourth wall,
And I think also like what's I guess it is both. It's a double-edged sword. It does provide a really intriguing, like, and very blatant critique on the system we live in. However, at the same time, it's then been used by our generation as like a means of pop culture to actually idolize it rather than shame it.
oh yes, we definitely have to mention the ray of memes.
Yeah. What is
Um,
your interpretation of all that?
I do think genuinely that most of the people like actually no, you know what? No, never mind. I changed my mind. I was going to say that most of the people liking those posts have a post-ironic humor like me, but I don't think that's the truth because now that I think about it, the rise of sigma males, of alpha males, all of
Yeah,
that.
you'd be
Like
surprised at how
some
many people take that seriously. Like,
do that unironically, and I think that's horrifying because those people were taking the movie and the book at face value when it was not meant to be taken at face value. That was the whole point of it. It was meant to mock the very people, the very lifestyle that these people want to follow.
mhm. Um, and then
So I guess, sorry, yeah.
I was going to ask, do you think though that because it's been taken in that direction, do you think it's like an innate part of human nature? Like, although it's so blatantly making fun of how people are glorifying and are they're obsessed and they're so like they're being very overtly into vanity. Would you say
Hmm.
that because people have gravitated to it and then are now indulged in pop culture, it shows that it's innately part of human nature?
I think, well, the okay, there's I guess two parts to this question, so let's break it down. The first one is whether or not it's um like why people decided to take this at face value. And I
Hmm.
think that also ties to a bigger problem of media illiteracy that a lot of, well, especially now that we're exposed to so many forms of media that a lot of people are facing. And I think people not having sufficient critical thinking skills to analyze a book like this, to not take it at face value. I feel like it's, of course, not just this book, because this book, let's face it, like, or this movie, let's face it, not everybody has watched it. Not every single, self-proclaimed Sigma male has watched this. But just in general, pop culture and media and what it feeds into, I feel like people can't like distinguish between what is irony, what is sarcasm, and what is true sometimes.
Mm.
Um, yeah, because of media literacy. But the second part is whether or not it's a part of human nature.
Hmm.
Um, I actually started thinking that I don't think it's innately a human thing, but it might be deeply tied into certain cultures. Because I bet there is some culture, still living in the middle of nowhere, without access to internet, without access to the media that we consume every day. And I bet they are completely different. I don't think vanity. Actually, I just thought of something. So there's actually this very interesting psychological experiment that has been done on the effect of television on eating disorders.
Hmm.
It was um, it was a small island in the Pacific, if I'm not wrong, and they found that over 70% of women went on a diet or developed an eating disorder 70% more than before. Like before, nobody was on a diet.
Okay.
They compared to the control group right before, like right as television was like becoming a thing in that island. And then after, I believe, a couple of months, maybe 7 months,
Hmm.
if I remember, but I don't want to make things up. But yeah, this just shows I think that it might not be innate, but it is an innate part of certain cultures, and it's very deeply rooted in those cultures, I think.
I see. So I guess then that raises the question, like, what about like what aspects of a culture could lead it to it? I mean, because these things definitely cater a lot to Western culture. Not just, of course, this is set to in America, but I mean North America in general, but of course Western Europe, the UK, France, Germany. I mean, like, what aspects do you think are common there that you would say could maybe be more prone to indulging in this kind of culture?
I think the idea of freedom, especially in the United States, like the freedom also extends to, for example, the market, which is why I think capitalism is such a big thing in the United States, because the United States has been kind of founded the ideas of absolute freedom, right? And I think that aspect definitely helps
But
to
wouldn't you
create.
say
Sorry, yeah.
France was also built like modern day, the Republic of France. I mean, they went on a whole tear, killed tons of nobility, tons of king within the pursuit of creating equal citizen and creating freedom for man.
I think because the French kind of, pardon my French here, landed on their on their bare ass.
What do you mean?
Cut that part out. No, like if you think about it, yeah, sure, there was the revolution, and
Hmm.
then there was the First Republic and the Second Republic, and then there was Napoleon.
Hmm.
So if you think about it, the French didn't win, but the United States, Americans, in a way, they did win. They did succeed. They got the British out. So I feel like French don't believe in total and absolute freedom. But I also think, like, I don't know.
But then, if it's so American, is America is known for their new form of new imperialism. And more notably, we can look at, let's say, Germany nowadays, right? The new constitution that Germany uses was implemented by the United States during the fall of World War II. So wouldn't shouldn't we see kind of like echoes of that into German society? Um,
Oh, for sure, there are echoes of that into German society, but I still think that German culture around surrounding work is different. I don't think, like, for example, if you think about it, the American dream is also such an integral part of American culture right now. Um, and actually, I think it might be founded on the idea also of immigration, perhaps, because people came to the United States thinking, this land is going to be a new opportunity for me. I'm gonna suddenly become rich. I'm gonna build my way up to the top. Whereas I don't like there are right now there are people coming into Germany with a similar mindset, but that only started relatively recently comparing to the United States, whereas the United States was, in my opinion, founded on that.
but so then I guess this leads to the idea of, do you think that just America is ahead of the curve in this, and that like now we're going to see a lot of European nations following in suit, maybe 20, 30 years down the line?
I don't think it's ever going to reach the same extent in Europe because it started earlier in the United States when we still didn't have the same set of not morals, but I guess the idea of what life should be, like what work-life balance should be. Like I don't think that idea was there in the 16 or the 1700s or like the 1800s or even the early 1900s when people were flooding into the United States looking for a way to get rich.
Hmm.
Whereas right now, I think we have realized, yo, maybe we should put some regulations on work. Um,
But
so, for example, like in Germany, on Sundays, everything is closed, and that's so that people can spend time with their family at home. Um, yeah.
but like, wouldn't you say then? I don't know how much I can agree with that, because we see the rise of these right-wing parties that are a lot more pro-business, that want to maybe kind of push into, like, for example, the Conservative, the Tory party in the UK. They've been in power for the last 10 years or so, maybe
Hmm.
even longer. And again, they preach a lot of the same values that you would see Republicans preaching. Not obviously not to the same extent. However, I would argue that, I mean, the UK seems to be inching closer and closer to this like American style of consumerism that we see in American Psycho. I just think that they're behind the curve a bit because America was first. It stemmed in the 60s and now it's gone rampant. I think maybe 20 years down the line, we could see something that rhymes with what's going on in American society right now.
Yeah, I can see that happening in the UK, but I don't think in the European landmass outside, except for the UK. I can't see it happening to the same extent as it has happened in the United States.
I
But the
guess.
UK, I can see it getting there. Yeah, for
But
sure.
I'm confused on why Europe is such a special place. We're talking about not even culturally, policy, government. I mean, like if we can look at Italy, we have Maloney in charge there, and she's again taking a more pro-business approach, loosening up on. I mean, we have strikes all across Germany here, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We have strikes all over Germany. So if you think about it, and German working conditions are already so much better than American ones, if you think about it. Like the mandatory days off, Americans get like what, 2 weeks, I think, depending on, of course, what work you're doing and what
Hmm.
company you're working for. But I think the mandatory is that you get 2 weeks off every year, versus in Germany, I believe it's 1 month. I might be wrong, but
Hmm.
it's definitely more than in the United States. Um, and the wages, the minimum wage, it's higher in Germany, even though the costs of living are much higher in the United States, which is crazy to think about.
I think
Um,
that depends on where you live though. Like in
oh
like
yeah,
West
of course.
Virginia, like it's like $7, but if you go to California, it's 15, which is above Germany. Um,
Well, yeah, but also California is like what 10 times more expensive than Germany to live in. So yeah, of course it's relative, but it's still, you know.
mhm.
very, very bad comparing to Germany. And also Germany, like in general, European, especially Western European and Scandinavian countries, have like a really good Gini coefficient.
I'm sorry.
Um, Gini coefficient, do you know?
What is this? Yeah, I haven't heard of this.
It's a way to measure how distributed wealth is. So the lower it is, the more distributed it is, the more equal it is between people versus the higher it is, the worse it is,
Okay.
basically. So you have like, and if you have one, like it's between 0 and 1, and if you're at 1, that means that like one person owns all the wealth, and if you're at 0, that means everybody has exactly the same amount. And most countries in Europe, especially Western Europe and Scandinavia, once again, keep it around 0.3.
Hmm.
Versus, let me search it up. What is the US Gini coefficient? Because I'm not sure. Versus in the US, it's about 0.5.
I think I can agree with that. I agree that Europe is certainly right now is, but I think that in the future, because we're a globalized economy now, and now these external pressures, whether through migration, whether through just increasing inflation or income inequality, is going to start to place these same clamps that we saw in America, just throughout Europe as well. Like right now, of course, everyone is protesting against it, but I think it's just that because globalization has become such a strong force, it's really going to start putting a lot of pressure on lawmakers in Europe to then follow the same type of culture that we see in America and in the American psycho predominantly.
Uh, I don't think so. I think actually right-wing populism is on the rise mainly because of an economic crash. I think that's just natural to happen because like COVID made us go into a recession. But I think we can already see like it ending. Like I think slowly, actually not everywhere, never mind. Um,
I
but
mean,
once again, I think the strikers in Europe have a lot more power. Like protesters have a lot more power. I mean, in Germany, like in a lot of places, you have to be in a union in order to get a job.
I think that goes
Um,
the same though for the US. I think a lot of people don't realize unions are very big, like especially New York. I mean, the electricians union is known. The teachers union
Yeah.
is one of the biggest lobby groups. And
But it's very interesting because, sorry, because even though you have all of those unions, the workers' rights are still worse than in Europe. So I really think it just goes down to culture, to cultural values.
I wouldn't say it's the workers' rights are at less. I think it's just the expectation is different, even from the worker themselves. They don't what they expect from the government and their employer is a lot different than in a lot of places in the world.
Yeah, I can see that, but I also think I think it's both.
Hmm.
I guess moving on, we could talk a little bit more in depth about certain scenes that caught our attention or certain symbols or people in the book that were like repeatedly mentioned. So
Hmm.
one of them was Donald J. Trump, our favorite American president.
The big man himself, yeah. Um, I guess he's brought up throughout the book, and it was actually really interesting to read as an American. And I have I know a lot of people in New York who grew up there throughout the 80s into 90s and still live there to this day. And they tell me about it, and it seems really interesting how the image of Donald Trump has changed because originally when he first like became popular in the 80s, he was actually seen more like a quote unquote savior of New York. Um, because leading up to it in the 70s, like New York was kind of a shithole. Like there, it was known for just crime, and it was dirty and loud.
Did he actually give back something to the community, or was I actually
Ye-
have no idea?
yes and no. He kind of made New York into, at least from what the perception is, from people who were in touch with Donald Trump during that time, is he kind of made New York be have the charm it does. Like that modern, like kind of like 80s, 90s, like rich charm that it has. He built Trump Tower and he brought a lot of wealth and money to the city. And then he also built the ice skating ring in Central Park, which is an iconic spot for anyone going to New York. I mean, I believe it was in also Home Alone. It featured a scene, and plenty of Christmas movies. It's been there. Um, and he built it. However, as much, that may seem like giving back to the community because it's a public facility that he wouldn't seem to gain from. He got a huge press boost. Everyone loved him. Everyone he gave a lot of attention. However, in the construction of this, actually, he promised the construction company that he would mention them and tell them how great they were and give them recommendations for them to have a boost of business. However, he never did any of that. He virtually screwed over the construction company. He didn't have to pay a single dollar for the construction of the ice skating ring there. And that's what a lot of critics tend to point this out about his past, on top of the numerous bankruptcies and like failures in Atlanta.
And
Um,
also maybe his treatment towards, women. That
that
also
was
wasn't so great.
Yeah, that didn't really come out until he tried taking a political career. He wasn't. Yeah, and
We
then
can here see, sorry, we can here see how it's totally normal for a businessman to have shady affairs with women. However, if you're a politician,
it's going right under the spotlight. It's going right under. Um, and then he was iconic for a while. Like he was doing there's this show. I forgot the name of the show. Shoot, it was so famous.
I know he played in Kevin, and I think in New York.
Yeah, he was also in that. I have to look this up real quick. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot this show. It was called The Apprentice. There we go. And he says the famous thing like, "Oh, you're fired." Um, I don't know if you've heard that
I've
before.
never heard of that show. I'm sorry, but yeah.
But yeah, so that's how he was perceived. And then obviously when the elections came and he chose to run on the Republican ballot, I think New York turned on him. Like they bastardized him. I mean, for good reason. He was vouching on some crazy shit. Um, and yeah, no, it was certainly an interesting way. And then in the book itself, it was you can see that like he was aspiring to be like Donald Trump, this character, this almost kind of like a American dream type of person, um, who reinvented the image of New York that he glorifies so much.
But that's actually very interesting because if we compare Patrick Bateman to Donald J. Trump, we have this, cold-blooded, almost sociopath versus a guy who talks funny and has funny hairstyles. Like,
I think
sorry.
there's obviously more to Trump than just that, right? Like it's
No, of course, but what I was trying to say more is yeah, okay, so we have this cold-blooded sociopath versus a man who's very outspoken, very you could even say, I mean, he has a sort of charm to himself. Do you think this might be because we know what Patrick Bateman thinks versus we don't know what Trump thinks? Or do you think they were just very different people?
I certainly think like the charisma. I don't know how to describe it other than like the aesthetic or whatever, like the toteness, like the pushing the shoulders up in your own kind of like pompous, like posh New York way. I feel like is such like I think of Trump when I think of that, like the douchebag, Wall Street worker. I feel like Donald Trump kind of pioneered that image in my brain. This is just my perception. Like that, there's no, there's not a lot of backing to this, but I just think like he certainly is a figure in this kind of representation of these Wall Street workers.
But don't you think it's also ironic in a way where he, for example, he didn't pay anything to the construction site.
Hmm.
He also, paid for, like, created all this infrastructure, but he created it for himself. He never, it surely created some job opportunities or whatever, but let's face it, those people were making cents when he was making billions.
Yeah,
Don't you
yeah.
think it's ironic to idolize a figure like that?
I mean, of course. I think it speaks to like how what it means to get a big name in America, but I also just think it also shows what it means to get a big name anyway. Like you're anyone's quote unquote heroes or anyone's like or anyone famous, They didn't just do it honestly. You have to kind of step over some fingers or exploit people in order to kind of get to the top. Um,
Or be born very rich.
yes, yeah, or yeah.
That's Patrick Bateman,
Or Trump did
but
both. He was born rich and stepped over fingers. So, you know.
yeah, 2 in 1.
Exactly. Um, were there any other aspects of the book that you thought were really interesting? Um, any symbolism or any other like kind of literary aspects you wanted to look at?
Do we want to look at the business cards scene?
I mean, that was in the book, right? But I mean, that was in the movie, but the book made it seem very, I don't know, it almost brushed over that
Yes.
scene.
Yeah, that is true. It's very interesting. Maybe we can focus on how it was highlighted so much in the movie versus, and it was also like they added a couple of details there, right?
Do you remember those details? I don't remember those details.
We need. So let's move on. Cut that part out.
Um,
Um,
you
we
want to,
could talk about. I'll be very honest with you. Okay, this is off the record. Off the record. I
yeah.
don't remember half of this book. I if I read the ending of it. So
Okay, that's fine. Do you remember enough? Do you want to go on a yapping rant about women in the book?
actually, you know what? I have my book right here. I'm just gonna do what I do in English class and
Like, do you have enough like drive right now? Do you think you could go on a rant about feminism in
feminism always,
because I just
always.
yapped about the history of Trump, so you can go off about.
Oh, I could yap about. Oh, no, wait. I should have prepared for this. Holy crap. Okay, yeah, I can yap about it.
You got it?
But it's gonna be so general.
I'm trying to connect it to the book as much as you can, like loose examples if you can, or just keep mentioning the book, like in the book, like in the book, like that.
No, it's fine for sure.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about something that nobody talks about in books like these, and that is the women in this book. I mean, not the prostitutes, but I'm talking about the other women. But we can also talk about. Okay, that was awkward phrasing.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
maybe like you don't have to come off so cunt.
yeah, that's fine. Okay, wait, what? War affects people? Huh? What is this from?
I have something we could talk about.
Oh, Ricky Tar. Sorry, I don't know why I have a note from the movie. And okay, yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember the scene where he was like, in both, they did, it was like this in both mediums, where he was like, "Oh, we have to fix poverty, we have to fix racism, we have to fix all that."
That scene was so interesting to me because actually Patrick Bateman on multiple occasions would go on long rants about how messed up the world is, but we can also see how he treats homeless people, how he treats, people who have been failed by the system, also sex workers, people who are considered on the lower end of the social hierarchy that has been perpetuated by capitalism.
Hmm.
Um, Do you think he's actually worse because he has the awareness clearly? I mean, he's lecturing other people about it. Do you think that makes him worse? Or does that make him slightly better than his counterparts who are unaware of anything and they just live in their little tiny bubble in the better side of New York?
That's a really good question. I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to say because you could obviously go with the argument like ignorance is bliss, right? But you could
Yeah, I'm
also,
sure like Owen was happier than him in his little, well, yeah, I'm better than everybody word until he died. But
yeah. Or you could also say like, he's an asshole, whatever. He didn't like he knows it, but he ignores it. But at the same time, what can he do? Like you might know everything. You might know the truth about the world, right? But like, ultimately, what is that going to do for you? Does that change anything? Does that do anything? So why not indulge what's around you and just go along with it? So yeah, if I think it like shows like I don't know. It's hard to say if that makes him a
so
better
is
person
he
or not.
very,
Hmm?
It's a very interesting point that you kind of started. I mean, not just what you said about how you can't change anything, because if you think about it, Patrick, sorry, please get that out as well. Patrick Bateman is really rich. He could easily, provide housing. He could probably donate a lot of money to like a shelter for homeless people or like an education center for the women that might have like felt the need to become sex workers just because they couldn't do anything else because they lacked the necessary education for it. Like he could have done all of that. He could have given back to his community, uplifted them. He actually had the means to do it.
Hmm.
So in my opinion, actually he was worse for knowing, for having the social awareness and then actively choosing to ignore it. Um
Mm.
Although I can't help but feel some sympathy for him because it is a pretty, I do believe that ignorance is bliss, but I think it is also the comfortable way out, and I think more people should be taking the other route out.
Hmm. I mean, I think within the frame of the story, obviously, I mean, he's a psychopath, right? It's called American Psycho. So he just wants to murder. But if we were to use this as like a model for people, I mean, I think like even if you were to donate everything, the real value in change comes from I think a top-down system, right? Like it has to be government instituted, right? I think like why should it be? You might also think, and I think a lot of Americans would feel like it's not my responsibility. They're on their own. I think it's a very American thought process. Like,
I do think it reflects it very well, but don't you think that seeing how in the United States, like wealth is very tied to power, you can easily, I mean not easily, but historically, a lot of politicians have been bought off. A lot of rich people like Trump, for example, it's easier for them to become politicians, prominent politicians, because they have the money for campaigning, right? They don't even need to rely on donors, because they just have enough money for that.
I'm not sure how true that is. I think they don't pay out of pocket usually for it. It's just they have connections to rich donors because they are rich. Um,
Oh yeah, for sure, but still.
I think like one man, unless you're like Bezos or someone, can't influence a lobby. Like he's just like a mid-level, stock trader. And I think a lot of people, and even if you are high end, like you're getting paid enough to influence, I think most people in their own situation don't think that they have the power to change. Even if you have the money and everything, I just I think when you're in the situation itself, you don't think you have as much power than you actually do.
Okay, so you think it's so deeply rooted into the system that you would have to change the whole system,
Yeah.
which would then, but I think it's a matter of comfort as well. And of course, like I don't blame the people who make it to the top and then, you know, don't want to give up all of their wealth, especially that they gained through hard work if they actually did work hard, for some other people. Because like, it comes down to the idea of like, yeah, why didn't the other person just do that as well?
Hmm.
But I also think it's important to, remember that Patrick Bateman is a white guy who is the son of a rich CEO, and that's not the case for most people. Um, and I think people forget about that. I forgot where I was going with my point, but yeah.
You just wanted to say he was a white guy. I'm so confused.
No, I was trying to say, not everyone starts at the same
Oh,
point,
okay, I see it. I see
which
it.
I feel like is what a lot of rich people forget.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
But I think also in America, especially, people prop up stories where they show even someone came from the Bronx and made it like people might look at like Ice Cube, someone who grew up in Compton and he made his way up all the way to the top, and now he's worth I don't know how much, but like tens of millions, right? So like I think the average person isn't, even if they do realize, oh, I'm a white male, XYZ, they're still being fed other things where even if you're in Compton or you're in like shady areas of like Austin or whatever, you could still make it out, right? And that's what people are being fed. I don't think, and there's no way for you to verify it unless you actually step down on the streets of Compton or Skid Row in LA, um, right? So you have to actively be searching in it. You can't just like look at around you and then come to a conclusion. What do you think about that evaluation?
Oh, I think it's a fair evaluation, yeah.
Hmm. And would you recommend this read? Let's say it's about it's 30 years old now, almost 35. Um,
Yes, definitely. I would recommend both reading the book and watching the movie. Probably reading the book first. I did it the other way around.
hmm
And if you're into psychology, watch the movie to diagnose Patrick Bateman. 10 out of 10. It was a great experience. We had to do it at a psychiatry or like neuromedicine camp. But overall, I think it's horrible how it's still relevant today, and maybe even more than ever. Circling back, I would recommend it. I think it's more relevant right now than ever, which is slightly horrifying. But I think now we have more awareness about it, thanks to people like Brett Ellis, about how
Dangerous.
fucked up,
Yeah.
yeah, just about how fucked up consumerism can be. And I think it's also a great commentary on mental health, um,
hmm
that was perpetuated by capitalism because it benefits capitalism. And yeah,
Yeah.
what
I,
about you?
I would also recommend it. I mean, if you're not so in love with the idea of it, you don't have to read the book, but I would most certainly recommend reading the movie. The book at times could be a little hard and drawn out. Like it's a slow boil for sure. The build
Yes,
up.
it has. I have it right here. 300, um, 84 pages.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, I would 100% recommend if this topic is like uh really grabs your attention. So I
And if
would
you're able to ignore, sorry, if you're able to ignore things you find annoying for the sake of receiving the message, like if you analyze as you read, then the book is for you.
definitely, definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This was Future Unemployed with Paula, and this was our first episode, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you to our 3 listeners.